this video, I want to discuss time, time travel, and timelines. So, um, basically the construct of time, and as we interact with time in this realm and on this earth, as humans, with our perception of what time is, we see time in a linear fashion. So we can see time as from when we were born all the way up. We cannot see when we're going to die because we don't see into the future, but we can see from the past. So we can see from the past based on the memories that are inside of us. We can't physically go back to that past timeline or that past point in time in our life, but we can in our memory, in our mind. So it's kind of interesting how we can go back in our mind, but how then would we be able to go back physically to that particular time, that point in time? And if we can potentially see some of the things that could happen in our future based on our decisions that we're making in our life now, could we ever go to the future to see, what is happening there? There's just some questions that I think about myself and wonder, how does time travel work? How do the different timelines that are potentiality, basically, for not just individuals, but collectives as a whole, and then in the greater aspect, many different planets and universes. How does time interact with all of that? Some of the thoughts on time are looking at time as an individual. You can look at time as a very tall building, and there's many different floors on that building. And if you would go up floors, that would be the future, and if you would go down floors, that would be the past. If you took that building and you collapsed it and you spread all of the floors out evenly in a straight line, that would be a timeline. And then could you then go across those floors, forwards and backwards? Those are just some questions about time that I think about. And also, how do those, if you think again about that building, like you in your life in this particular moment, you're this very tall building and that's all of your time. But that could also work as a collective. All of those different collectives are tons and tons and tons of buildings, and they all have different timelines based on themselves. And how do those then interact with each other? How do they overlap and intercross so that we meet people at different times? How does, the potential people that are coming from a different timeline in the future then how do they travel? How does that work? How would they know where to travel and how to travel and get to a particular point in time to interact with all of the lives? Do all of the lives interact at the same time, or are we seeing the time individually within our own perception? Could time function as bubbles? So think about blowing bubbles, and each little bubble is its own little space and time and moment. Or throwing a rock into a pond and seeing the ripples. That rock that you throw into the pond at that potential time and moment causes the ripples throughout the pond. Could time be more like water, like the pond? Those are just some unique things about time that are so interesting. I find it very interesting because our construct of time and the way that we plan our days by a clock, by, of course, our planet and its rotation and our sun, our moon, and our seasons, that's all beautiful and natural. But how unnatural does it feel sometimes to be so constrained by the lockdown, if you will, of hours and seconds. Sometimes that feels unnatural. And have you ever felt like time is being weird? Like a day goes by super, super slow, or another day so fast, where did the time go? And how does that make sense? So I just wanted to do a video and talk a little bit about time, because we do hear things about time travel. And we've heard a lot lately about different timelines and how we may be moving from one timeline into another timeline. Could we jump time? So if we are destined potentially to live in one particular timeline, could the universal clock, if you will, the natural universal clock, just as our natural world revolves around the solar system and the sun and the planets and the moon, could that natural movement in time be something that helps propel our dimension right now in this time and space into a different time and space, so that we are now more aligned with a better timeline? And time travel. How does time travel work? How would it work? How would beings from the past or from the future come back into the past? How would a time machine actually be able to travel? Could a time machine even travel forwards? Since potentiality has not happened yet, how would you be able to travel forward? I've thought about it a little bit like in time travel itself, those buildings that I was talking about, how you have a building with tons and tons of floors, you would only be able to travel to the top of that building. You couldn't travel to the future, of course, because if you were coming from the future back into the past, you would land on the top of a building. And then all of the different points in time would be the different floors of that building. So those are just some of my thoughts. I would be very curious to hear about thoughts from other people. And it's just so interesting to think about, because I do believe that there are different timelines that are happening and merging, and that we are about to jump or move into another timeline. I've also wondered if everyone is going to move. So just like those buildings I was talking about, if each person was a building with all its own time, possibly groups of buildings will stay in one timeline and groups of buildings will go to another timeline. So let me know your thoughts and comments, and thank you for listening.